With strict schedules and busy queues and trying to wedge loads of bikes on, it's easy to see why e-bikes are often called the uplift killer or the shuttle killer. And that's because you can do a lot of what you can do with a shuttle and uplift rig on an e-bike, especially a lightweight e-bike like this, where you can attack the trails really nicely. But what about if you change that thought? And instead of being sort of anti-uplift, you actually use the uplift with your e-bike. We're going to use this lightweight eMTB to find out if we can do both and ride the trails here as we would normally, but also use the gravity assist of an actual uplift as well. Let's find out. Here in the Forest of Dean, there are 2 XC loops, at least. I'm sure there's more, but officially there's 2. There's 14 downhill runs as well. So can I complete them all by any means necessary using, well, this e-bike and an uplift as well? Okay, there's a lot going on there. So we'll break it down into 3 things. First, we've got, can I do 2 laps of the XC tracks here on 1 battery on this bike? And then how many of the downhill loops can I do using an uplift, again, on this bike? And finally, final thing, what's the most taxing? Is it the XC loop? Is it going to be the downhill runs and the uplift? I've got my heart rate on, I've got my Garmin recording data. Let's go and find out which one's more taxing. I think this Canyon Neuron On Fly is a perfect tool for this task, mixing up longer XC trails and enjoying the gravity trails too. This one has got a 400 watt-hour battery. We've got 140mm of travel front and rear, and we've upgraded the tyres to something a little bit burlier to help extra grip and extra traction. So this morning we're going to do the cross country, and then when I've most likely run out of, techie bit, concentrating, when I've most likely run out of juice and fuel, I'll get on the van. Here goes. I'm going to do the Adit Trail and the Verdurous Trail together. So I think that adds up to around 28 Ks of pedalling. So, well, I better get started. Right, so here we are. I mean, it's definitely not as easy as an uplift, but on a day like this, when it's quite warm and quite hot, it's a lot more fun being outside than in a van trapped with loads of stinky bikers. Okay, as I catch my breath, I think there's quite a lot of pros to using an e-bike at a bike park or on a mountain, a really big mountain, say in the Swiss Alps. But even here, we've got the flexibility of when we want to ride, and we've got flexibility on wherever and whatever we want to ride, we can do it. We don't have to wait for any queues, we don't have to wait for any uplift vehicle, we can just go. Also gives us a bit more range to go and explore different trails. So we're not tied to having to get to the top and then just exploring that zone. And I think this one applies really well to sort of mountain terrain, especially big mountains that are served by ski lifts, where you're kind of trapped by going all the way up to the top. And if weather limits that, or if the trails that are on that, underneath that chairlift and around it aren't to your liking, well, with an e-bike, you could go halfway up and find a really good descent. It does open up the terrain that you can ride. Right, well, before we dive into the data, I guess we've also got to talk about the cons of riding an e-bike at a trail centre or in the mountains. And that's, well, you've got to think about when you're going to use your battery, and you've got to carefully manage it. So you can't just charge around in turbo the whole time. Well, maybe you can if you've got enough range, and that's the thing, is to know how much range you've got. I mean, the other thing is kind of obvious that if you're going for a big day out in the mountains or a big day out at a bike park, you've got to plan ahead. You've got to make sure that you've got all the right stuff, whether it be kind of jackets or extra batteries. If you need a range extender, you've got to plan ahead. You've got to plan ahead for snacks as well. I guess the other things are that if you're planning to use turbo on steeper sections of climbs to save your legs on the descents, well, yeah, you've got to balance it really carefully. And finally, unfortunately, if you're a heavier rider or you're carrying even more weight with a backpack and all the stuff you need, that is going to eat into your battery range. So you've just got to, yeah, manage it carefully, I think, but it's doable. Okay, right, I have now refueled, got a bit more clarity back. So I've been refueled, the bike is not. So a couple of stats on that. I did, let's have a look, I did 28 Ks with nearly 700 meters of climbing and, average heart rate, 129 beats per minute. Max, 182, which I've got to say is an older gent. I'm quite pleased with that. Also flies in the face of people thinking that e-bikes are lazy. Average 129 beats per minute. I don't think that's average. Right, next up, I've got to get on the Uplift. Bit scared of the Uplift, but it should allow me to do even more laps and even more time. Be interesting to see which one gives me the higher heart rate this afternoon or this morning. Let's go find out. Time to do some runs. Exciting stuff. Okay, we've got 13 trails here. We're going to start with, well, I feel like Jonesy wants me to start on double black diamonds, but I think we actually want to finish the video not in A&E. So we're going to start with some black runs. We'll head off with sheep skull. For me, it's not the strongest rider around. I can move it around just that much more than a heavier, full-fat e-bike. Suit a nice lightweight e-bike like this. Let's go. I'm actually feeling the smalling in my legs. I think it's time to dial it down from all those gnarly black runs and do something just fun and hit a blue. Okay, we've got quite a few runs in now. And yeah, I guess it's time to talk about the pros of why you take an e-bike on an Uplift. And to be fair, there's quite a few of them. So I think for me, I think there's the physical exertion thing, and that's you're getting an Uplift up, you're not having to physically exert yourself on the climb. And that's great for me. It means I can concentrate and save a bit of energy for the downhills. But it's interesting chatting on the Uplift to a couple of people, including the driver actually, who said that he gets quite a lot of e-bikes on there. And it's not so much that people with e-bikes want to ride there, it's that they're going to ride with their friends who don't have e-bikes. And I think that's a really good thing to consider. I guess it works the other way too. If you've got pals with really hardcore sort of enduro bikes and you're wanting to ride with them, well, you could pedal up, but if you want to have that social aspect, which is so fun in mountain biking, well, all sticking together on a climb or on an Uplift is a really good factor. Okay, before I get too fatigued, I feel like we probably should talk about the cons. What are the drawbacks of doing Uplift on an e-bike? Well, I guess as I've mentioned before, you can get out of phase with the Uplift. So that means that, well, you can be waiting around a lot more than if you just head up the hill yourself. And if you get out of phase on one Uplift cycle, well, you can be waiting a while. It can be tricky. So you've got to think smart about it. I guess the other thing is it does cost, and depending on where you are, if you're here, I think it's about £6. a run, or for a whole day it's around £45. But obviously if you've got ski lifts, if you've got chair lifts, if you've got other things like that that you're using, then the cost can kind of ramp up quite quickly. And I'm sweating just here in the outside. I think that's another real con actually is, well, yeah, you're in a van with up to 20 sweaty, unfortunately often men, obviously women just glow. But yeah, sometimes it's not fun, especially on a really hot day. It can be real stinky. It's not that fun. It's not like being out here where you've got pine fresh smell everywhere you go. So it's something worth considering. Wow, time for a little bit of a breather. I think this might be the 7th run? No. Yes, this will be finishing the 7th. We've done 6 runs so far, so we've done about, Garmin says, about 12k, and that's just of descending, so we've really packed it in there. Yeah, I think what's interesting is, well, maximum speed is actually pretty similar, like I did about 34 kilometers an hour. What's actually most interesting is my average heart rate was 140, the max 179. So, okay, I was 182 this morning doing the cross-country lap, but my average was actually lower. So I think for the riding, the intensity is really up there. It's not kind of getting away from not riding and kind of missing out on any fitness. I mean, I got really lucky with the Uplift today because the weather was really good, because I did fall out of phase with when the Uplift was happening. And I think that's something that you do need to be mindful of, is you can fall out of phase, and if it's a wet, grim day, okay, you're not having to pedal to the top, but it does mean that you're waiting around, and, well, you can get cold and it can be quite grim. So if it's a wet day, I think I'd just pedal up and enjoy that time pedaling, knowing that I'm kind of keeping warm and keeping motivated. In terms of the social aspect, if you're with a group of mates, I think the Uplift can be absolutely fantastic. You're there, everyone's there, it's really inclusive in terms of experience of climbing. If someone's fitter, if someone's not got an e-bike, you can all ride together. I mean, obviously you should all ride together and not be a kind of e-biker that sprints away from friends that don't have e-bikes. I think if you're by yourself, then it really depends on the group of riders that you're in on the bus. I had kind of like some really good chats with people, and I had other sort of like very quiet Uplift. So I think it really depends if you're doing it solo or with a group. Okay, so if you prioritize the downhill stuff, and a little side note actually, one experience of doing loads of downhill runs back to back to back, for me, it really helped boost my confidence. I wasn't that confident previously after a less than optimal experience at a bike park, but I was able to kind of just go at my own pace, and just getting more laps in did really help. There wasn't those gaps in between. So repeatedly doing, in some cases, I think I did one track twice. It was a real confidence boost. So if you do favour the downhill and you favour the social aspect, then the Uplift can be brilliant, whether you've got an e-bike or not. I think it can really work. Of course, that's where e-bikes are fantastic, is that if you want kind of the nature aspect and you want to kind of have a bit of solo time just for sort of bare headspace, then e-bikes can do that too, especially at a bike park. And I think that loops around to the whole experience for me. It's been really good doing both. And obviously we've packed both in one day, but you could do an Uplift weekend, one weekend, and then the next just do full rides. I think that's what's really great about e-bikes, is that you can do both. But let us know in the comments about what you think. Let us know.